Sloppy Spoilers with your host, DT2. What's up, y'all? DG2 Comics Chat here, ready for another episode of Sloppy Spoilers. Tonight, we're going to be reviewing Andor Episode 1. And what I have to say after this first episode is, for all of y'all that wanted Star Wars to be more like Blade Runner, you're going to get your wish. Let me bring on my co-host. Welcome to David, Nemesis Howard.
Yo, what's up? Hey, that is so funny that you said that, because before you came into behind the scenes, I was telling Steve that opening scene, I was like, what is this, LA from Blade Runner? Or is this what it looks like?
Welcome to Steve, Shadewing Sellers.
Well, at least this was better than Kenobi. I'll give it that much. We got a lot to talk about with this one. But we'll get into that.
Yeah, my dead grandmother's better than Kenobi, but I digress. Anyway, shout out to Bracey in his absence. Not going to be joining us tonight, but always missed. Always missed. Okay, well, I'm going to start out like I usually do with general impressions. This was, I had a really hard time encapsulating everything about this episode because it is, let me use the phrase, quiet extremes. The stuff that it does well, it doesn't beat you over the head with it, but it's unbelievably good, the stuff that it does well. And the stuff that is lacking in, you got to pay attention and kind of read between the lines and ask yourself, when you get through watching the episode, what am I feeling and why do I feel that way? So for me, right off the bat, the cinematography is just phenomenal. The way this show looks in terms of the ruggedness of the setting, but also the actual picture quality. It just looks like if you could turn a crystal bell into a film. It's just so on point, and I was amazed by that. And so visually, it looks really, really good. I'm still questioning, and I know Steve can resonate with what I'm saying. I'm still questioning, is this a story that needs to be told? Mm-hmm. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, you might think Andor is a planet, but Andor is actually a person. Now, it's so funny because I said this on Twitter this week. Every side character does not need their own special or their own powers or their own focus. Now, when I tweeted that, I was talking more in reference to superhero characters and their supporting cast, but it applies here too. So if you don't know anything about the backstory here, if you saw Rogue One, sloppy spoilers, you know how Rogue One ends. And it gives us both the best Vader scenes we have ever seen and a tragic hero conclusion. So this show is a prequel to Rogue One, backing up and letting us see the rebel spy Cassian Andor's lead up to the film. And so when I got through with this first episode, I had to ask myself, did we need this? Does this story need to be told? Even if it's told well. And my criteria for that is always, can you lift it out and it doesn't make any difference? You can't lift The Empire Strikes Back out of the Star Wars canon, because that made all the difference. Everything that set Star Wars up for what we know it to be happened in Empire. Okay? Can you lift this out and still be the same story? That's the question we're going to have to answer as we watch this series. So I'm in a cautiously neutral place. I love beautiful visuals, but I also had to ask myself, who am I rooting for? Who do I care about? And so far, the droid steals the show. But we'll get into that. Let me hear your initial thoughts. Start with Steve.
Yeah, this was a show where I at first was wondering, okay, what is the point of this exactly? Because it's like I like Rogue One. I like Rogue One a lot. That was a really good film, but it was an ensemble. It was the Guns of Navarone in space with an ensemble cast, and there were a lot of really interesting characters. Um, but I don't know that I would necessarily want to see a movie about each of them. They work better kind of in a group in that context. So when you look at Cassian Andor, it's like, okay, you've got this guy who was an assassin for the Rebel Alliance, and he does a lot of the dirty stuff that the rebels don't like to talk about. Okay, that's a cool concept for a character. I agree that Diego Luna did very well with that character. I agree he still does very well with that character. The thing of it is he doesn't have a lot of depth beyond being a rebel assassin and beyond his relationships with the other members of the Rogue One group, especially Jin. So it's like, do we really want to see the origin of Cassian Andor? Who was really like clamoring for the origin of Cassian Andor? I
Right.
don't think that I was. Um, it's like, and even liking the character, it's like, okay, yeah, but what do you have to say about him that would be interesting and hasn't been done and would add something worthwhile? This is not like The Mandalorian. This is not like, Ahsoka or a number of other characters that have had lasting resonance with the series and that have interesting motivations and have interesting backgrounds that kind of allow you to tell more about them. I feel like Cassian is very much a one and done kind of character. And so when you drop him in here, it's like you've got to really build something really good around him to justify the show's existence. I am not 100% convinced yet that it does that. That having been said, I enjoyed this episode more than I have enjoyed a good chunk of the Book of Boba Fett. I enjoyed it way more than Kenobi. It's a perfectly solid episode, and it sets the groundwork for what it wants to achieve. But it's like, do I feel like I needed this in my life? Do I feel like this is offering me something that I absolutely have to have, or is this just like an okay diversion and like a light snack for a few minutes and then you just forget about it? And I kind of think it's kind of the latter.
Okay. Well, as usual, Steve said it extremely well, extremely articulately, because, do we need the origin of Cassian Andor? Go ahead, Nims.
Yeah, this one for me, I mean, I think that I could enjoy the origin for Cassian Andor. The problem is that if you're going to give me an origin story, if you're going to give me a hero's arc, even if it's an anti-hero's arc, you got to give me something compelling. And honestly, I didn't think that there was a whole lot compelling in this episode at all. I was tempted to watch ahead because I was like, why am I watching this? But I've done that other times and then judged looking backwards. And I don't think that that is a fair representation episode by episode. So I made sure that, before we talked about this today, that I only watched one episode. And so, my initial impressions after watching this was I was kind of bored, to be perfectly honest with you. The other thing that really struck me was there were moments that, I agree with you, DT. I think that it was shot beautifully. I mean, I think it definitely fits inside the Rogue One universe. It didn't feel very Star Warsy a lot of the time. It felt very Blade Runner-y, especially on that first planet. But that's okay. I enjoyed what I was getting. The problem is that I watched it and I was like, this doesn't feel like episodic TV. It gave me no reason other than this show for me to go to episode 2 because I didn't feel like we really did anything particularly noteworthy in the show. They gave me 10 minutes of kids talking in gibberish. And you got to throw me a bone and give me some idea of what they're talking about and why they're doing it and why they are there the way they are. Then they're looking for, whatever race Cassian Andor is, but it's like, he's just a human like any other human. How are you, the eyes give it away. It's like, well, the girl had eyes just like anyone else, it's just, that seemed kind of strange. And then finally, the bad guy that they're setting up is really just kind of a tool. I mean, he's a complete tool. I mean, the dude, he needs to go to that brothel and have a drink and unwind because that's what he needs. That guy is way too full of himself. But is he hateable? No, he's just kind of cringy, and it's like, and you're gonna leave me with that, and I'm like, okay, you've basically given me Frank Burns from MASH versus Cassian Andor, and I'm like, well, okay, I guess I'll watch episode 2 because I'm going to, but it really didn't grab me at all, so that was kind of strange.
So taking it from the top, the thing that I thought had the most potential and the thing that grabbed my attention right away, besides the visual, is his motivation. Because I love a good searching for a loved one story. I love stuff like that. So that kind of got my attention. But what struck me even more, just to go through, Andor is on Morlana 1 looking for his sister. And he's got a lead that takes him to a brothel. And so the mistress or headmistress or owner of the bar and the brothel says that, a Canary woman once worked there, but not there anymore. And then, a bunch of drunken goons or 2 drunken goons kind of set their eyes on Andor because they were talking, trash literally from the moment that we meet them. I wish that scene was written in such a way until it gripped me. What gripped me was how I felt like I was in the bar in Tron. That's what gripped me. I was like, we in Tron, right? This is like the Tron bar, right? Which I thought was cool. But what's missing from this show in larger chunks is also that good old Star Wars action. See, and Steve and I talk about this all the time. You can't strip a character or a story world of its signature elements and then think it's the same thing or it's going to have the same impact. And so I wasn't expecting to see a lightsaber, but I was expecting to see something a little bit more exciting than just a blaster. And I know this is the early days of the Empire. I know the Empire is we're maybe 15 years in. I get it, but still. And so again, if I were to write a scene like that or whatever, they kind of call him out for his emotion and his passion at the end. And then we see the flashbacks. We see him younger with his little sister, all of which is cool, but that's all kind of standard. Was there an incident that happened? Was there a deeper bond between them? Is there a hint at something else? Because one of the things that took Leia's character to a whole new level is when we find out she is the daughter of Anakin Skywalker. That completely changes who Leia is. Up until we find that out, we see Leia in one way. As soon as we find out she's force sensitive, she's a Skywalker, changes everything. And so maybe not a revelation on that level, but I was looking for something about the sister other than just good times. And it actually reminded me a lot about Moon Knight, about them going to the cave and the brother dying and all that. It reminded me a lot like that. And that's cool, but that's so normal for a Star Wars show. If I want normal, I wouldn't watch science fiction. If I wanted normal, I wouldn't watch fantasy. There's plenty of stuff like that. And so the visuals grip me more than anything else. And the lack of Star Wars type tech. But I thought I wanted a reason to care more about the sister being gone and just showing flashbacks and all that. I mean, that's kind of standard. So let me hear what you guys think. Start with Nims. Just about the opening crawl.
Sure. Well, let me go to the opening. With the scene with the guys giving him the stink eye and then the fight and the whole thing. It's like, the guys giving him the stink eye and everything. That seemed kind of strange. And then, the fact that they followed him. I'm willing to suspend disbelief, but if I'm 2 guys drunk in a brothel and they've got one guy out of the bar, so now they got the brothel to themselves, I don't know that I'm following some dude. I'm staying in the brothel. That's just my point. It's just a dude thing. But let's say that they do. They say that their attitude for meanness goes, outweighs their desire to stay in that establishment. So they follow him, and he kills one of them by accident, and then is forced with the decision with the other guy. Now, I understand that Cassian Andor, by the time we meet him in Rogue One, is a hardened assassin / operative for the Rebel Alliance. But here, he is brand new, and he is faced with a difficult choice. And to put him right off the bat of committing cold-blooded murder just didn't sit right with me. You know, I understand that he had to do it to get away, but I think there were other ways to write that, and it just came off as just jumping in the deep end right away. You know, I was like, okay, that's a way to go, and it wasn't, you know, and I can't disagree with it as a plot choice completely, but I think there might have been a different way to do it that could have combined some of those action elements that you're talking about, where he's trying to get away and ends up killing a second person, you know, to defend his life or something like that. There was a way to bring that in there and not have it be stereotypical. So that's one part. The second part with the kids, you know, I alluded to this before where they're talking gibberish and everything. It's like, okay, we've got these kids in what looks like this Lord of the Flies society. I mean, there's all these kids at low tech, you know, in the Star Wars universe sitting there. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And I was expecting to get like some subtitles or something. That's what I wanted. I wanted some subtitles to give me an idea of what this society is, this structure that they're living in. Obviously, there was one older female who was in charge. Cassia was trying to do stuff. There was some conflict there later on in the episode. There's some things there. There's some dialogue between the sister and the brother. I could kind of make, you know, take that out. That was the little sister trying to go with the brother, and the brother, you know, that was all going there. You know, and that I can figure that part out, but it's like, I want more. If you're going to make me care about the society, these kids, Cassian Andor as a kid, you got to make things even clearer in action, or you need to give me subtitles so that I can understand it, you know, better what exactly the situation is. As it is now, all I know is there's a bunch of kids living out there without supervision, and something crashed, and they're going out, presumably, I guess, the ship, though it looks like they had blow darts, which I thought was really kind of crazy, because it looked like they had blow darts and they were dipping them in poison and stuff. So I was like, who are these kids, and why are they living out there like the Bushmen of the Kalahari, or like a tribe from the Amazon or something? I wanted to know more about that, and so that was disappointing to me.
Steve, what'd you think?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Nem is saying, particularly when talking about the setup for basically the fight with Andor and the two guards. It really did seem like a lot of stuff was forced. One of the things that really continues to get on my nerves throughout this series is the fact that they're Kenari, and they can tell who's Kenari some magical way that they're Kenari. And I'm just sort of saying, he's a human. He looks like a human being. He's just some regular dude, you know, with scruffy beard and dark hair, and he's wearing a cloak. That on that planet, that could have been anybody. Even on the planet that he came from, that could have been anybody. You know, how do you know that they're Kenari specifically? I mean, how do you know he's not Corellian? How do you know he's not from some other human world, like, you know, like Coruscant or any number of places? How can you tell the difference? You can't. You can't. It's ridiculous. So that aside, though, I mean, I was okay with him accidentally killing the one guy. I got that that he had no choice but to kill the dude. It's like, okay, was there a better way for him to do it? Yeah, probably. Is it what Cassian would have done? Yeah, probably, because he is a guy who eventually becomes a pretty hardened assassin. So I can kind of see that being sort of the starting point for that. But I grant that there probably was a more elegant way to do it. So I'm willing to allow for that. But I mean, it just seems like that's kind of like a starting point that really should have kind of ended there. And it doesn't for some reason. But we'll kind of get into that when we talk about the annoying deputy inspector. That guy, I couldn't stand him, but could not stand him. But just kind of getting on with that. As far as the bit with the kids and the flashback to his childhood, it could have been interesting. I feel like there's the idea of him having been a tribesman and he kind of like learned how to behave in galactic civilization is interesting. I think you could do something with that. The show doesn't really do anything with it, but I think it's a neat idea. It's like, why don't we see more of this guy's heritage come up aside from, yeah, I knew this girl back on Kenari. Have you seen her? But that seems to be like all you see with that, and that's all that's done with that. I agree we needed subtitles because part of the problem with that whole segment is, okay, there's nothing really going on except the ship falling from the sky and presumably these tribes people gathering to figure out, okay, what are we going to do about it? Okay, we're going to form a war party and go after them. Okay, great. You do that, but it's just like, okay, but without the context, I have no reason to care about any of these characters. Yes. Without understanding what they're saying, I don't know who these people are. And what makes this worse is, if we're supposed to care about Cassian finding his sister, I would like to know who she is as a person. I would like to have some emotional investment in her, so I give a damn as to whether or not Cassian finds her or not. But there's none of that. It's just, yeah, they're chatting with each other in some language that I don't understand, and it's okay. Maybe they're meant to be, I got a feeling they're meant to be South American type of tribes, like, Amazon rainforest type of tribes. Okay, that's perfectly fine. I think that's a perfectly decent basis to build a society on, and I think that there are some interesting things that could be done with that. But it just seems like, they're kind of blowing their load on things in a way that's not really adding to the narrative and not really investing the viewer, and that's kind of a shame.
I will say also that at this point, having only watched the first episode, I'm not 100% convinced he's actually looking for that girl is his sister and that he's actually looking for her. And that's because I've seen Rogue One and I've seen what he does later on in this episode, and he's a proven liar and scoundrel.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So
it's only possible.
Right. So if that's handled well, that opens up a lot of possibilities as to what he's really doing.
Yeah. One other point I kind of realized, and they blundered on this. Cassian goes in and talks to the madam about, have you seen my sister? And it's like, oh, well, yeah, but, she didn't she used a fake name and, you can't find her now. And it's like, yeah, but she doesn't tell him the alias. It's like, look, I mean, at least give him the alias, because that's a lead. You could go over somewhere and see if she's used that alias somewhere else, but it's never brought up. The woman never mentions the alias, and Cassie never asked for it. That makes no sense to me.
All right. So when the scene shifts again, we find out that, after Cassian offs these guys, he goes back to his home planet of Ferrix, but hasn't always been his home planet. And like we talked about in the child scene, we find out that his name might actually be Casa, as what his sister calls him, but without the translations, and again, without context for just the flashback scenes. We can't really emotionally connect to it because we don't understand what we're looking at beyond the obvious surface things. And so then the guy that Steve's talking about, the pseudo-imperial guy, is Surreal Cam, trying to track him down, and we'll get into him. But here's the thing.
Darth Tool?
What do you say? Oh,
Darth Tool.
Yeah. Tool of the Empire.
Yeah.
The Empire Tool's back. Okay. But do you know what the droid's name is? The droid's name is
B2
Emo.
Oh. I miss K2SO already.
Oh,
yeah, I said, yeah. What did you say? So it's like when you're gonna, I mean, you can wink at the audience, but when you wink so hard, you break your left eyeball. I mean, good grief. So he's exactly that. But B2 Emo still kind of steals the show. He's R2 if he was emo, if he was moody, if he, he slumps his shoulders and all that kind of stuff.
See, I thought he was Marvin the paranoid android from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So.
Don't talk to me about life.
Yeah.
So B2 Emo, okay, I'm never not gonna laugh when I say that name, is asked to lie for him. Then he wants his best friend Brasso to lie for him, and he gets his ship access revoked, and already there are too many people with too many names, and I don't care about none of y'all. So then we meet Bix, which is, Eye Candy Girl. As soon as I saw, I was like, okay, Eye Candy Girl. And then now they've got a little relationship to where they're smuggling parts. And Bix's new boyfriend, who funnily has a name of Tim, you know, Anakin, Padme, Obi-Wan, Luke. So Tim has got a regular name. And so,
Those who call me Tim.
Yeah.
right. So they've got like the little smuggling operation going on, and he's trying to smuggle, like an NS9 Starpad unit, and everybody gasps when he says it, like he said, my name is Khan or something. She's like, you know how much that's worth it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's cool that y'all get it, but we don't care yet. And so I'm like, okay. So they're doing that, and I'm like, that might be important, that might be intriguing, that might be worth a watch. We already know he's a smuggler, but if there's more things connected, the problem is that you didn't tie enough of the potential teases of what it could be or where it could go to make us want to, stay invested and come back. Excuse me. It's just like there's nothing there that ties it. See, the way your brain learns, when your brain gets introduced to new information, your brain takes something it already knows and tries to relate it to the new information. And so the more you can connect what you already know to something new, the faster it is you can learn something. Because you're like, okay, I got that. And so I kept expecting something besides the fact that it's a prequel to Rogue One to connect us to a larger kind of action thing going on. And I'm like, that's cool that you got. And you can't tell me that those two, haven't been involved or are not going to get involved, because you don't talk to people like that where just ain't no chemistry, ain't no heat, ain't no nothing. So yeah, she's got a boyfriend or whatever, but he's already smelling that what that guy going on ain't right. And he's already jealous, which is right. So I'm like, we know what's going to happen. I'm like, y'all going to make out before this is over. So we already know where this is going. So, but other than that, I'm like, there's nothing here. So that being the case, I want to pivot to Captain Tool.
Real quick, I gotta say something on that.
Okay.
The thing with all that is, I think you hit it exactly on the head, which is that that guy is salty right out the bat. I'm like, something happened here, and it's like, if something happened, you have got to. Yeah, I agree, Adam. You've got to give me a taste. You got to give me a whiff of what happened there, because he's got way too much salt. I mean, he is borderline cuck territory already. So I'm like, what is going on with this guy? Not to mention that this was days of our lives. I'm like, we went from people getting shot in the head to, as the world turns, and I'm like, and they haven't given me a clue of anything that's going on. I'm like, and it's reminding me of all of the worst aspects that people talk about with Game of Thrones. The problem is that at least with Game of Thrones, nerds like us can have read the story already and know all the characters, and so I know what I'm watching. This is a brand new story, and all I've got is Rogue One to go by, so I'm guessing, just like everybody else. I'm like, all right, he's got some salt there. They must have had a relationship here. They're talking about this dude. I guess he's with the Empire. I mean, I'm doing all the work for the show constantly through this middle part. So,
Right. And I thought there was going to be, maybe I missed it. I thought there was going to be a more blatant Jen Erso tie-in, like what's she doing or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Steve, so let's hear your thoughts on Captain Tool of the Empire.
Oh, God. I don't understand what is the deal with this guy. I thought that Reva was bad, and yes, she's worse than him. But, I end up hating him because he's the living embodiment of lawful stupid. I mean, that's the way that you would call him. Like in D&D alignment terms, he's lawful stupid, because this is somebody who is just so devoted to law and order, in exact ways, that he is willing to go around his own boss to catch this guy when his own boss had pretty much exactly figured out what happened and had found a way to resolve this thing. That should have been the end of the show. It should have been like, directed by George Lucas, the end, at that point. That should have been the total end of it. But no, it's like he goes behind his back and just continues to pursue Andor, and he's got like the biggest stick up his rectum that I can imagine. He definitely needs to spend some time in the brothel or something, because
Yes.
I don't understand what his problem is. Like, I don't understand.
Panties.
Yeah, like, is he so determined to prove himself and get a promotion that he's willing to risk his career? Literally, he's risking his career by doing this. He's disobeying a direct order.
That you just hit on it, Steve.
None of it makes any sense. None of this guy's actions make any sense. Nothing that happens after him regarding this makes any sense. And on top of that, he is annoying. He is absolutely irritating to be around.
He's got a punchable face for sure.
He's got a very punchable face, and it's like he's not. I hate him in terms of like being a scary villain or being a love to hate character. There are plenty of love to hate characters, like in House of the Dragon, for example. Otto Hightower is a love to hate character. This guy is not a love to hate character. This is a guy that you hope will go away because you can't stand seeing him character, because he's just constantly irritating. He's pushing issues that make no sense. He's continuing to do things that are not even. It's not just that they're harmful to him, and it's not just that he's disobeying orders. It's that the chief inspector explains to him flatly, like, look, if you're pushing this, you keep pushing this, you are going to bring the Empire down on us, and then we can't operate. Take care, Adam. So they can't operate, if the Empire gives him a bad review because of whatever stuff that he's doing, looking for Cassian. It's like you're not seeing the big picture. All you're seeing is, well, these two men were murdered. One of them accidentally, and the other one arguably in self-defense, after these people were seen in a bar harassing this dude. It's like, it's clearly a case where you can make a very good case for self-defense. Why are you flat out saying that it's murder? It's just, do you have evidence showing that it's a murder? Do you have, forensic reports showing that it's a murder? No, you just decided that it's that because, you felt like it's a murder. Well, clearly your boss is a better detective than you, because he barely looked at the report and he figured out the whole situation and did so more accurately than you did after you spent how long looking into all of this stuff. So I'm just, this character is just beyond ridiculous. There is a place for Inspector Yavere type characters. There are definitely, if you want to have a villain for a scoundrel like Andor, yeah, it's fine to bring in a opposing cop to do that, and certainly an Imperial aligned cop would make sense. But this particular character is just not well executed, not well thought out. He is not in any way relatable or likable, and you don't fear him really. He's a joke. So yeah, I can't stand him.
Well, one thing I do want to say, and that is that I can understand on some level what he strikes me as he has part little man syndrome and he has part try too hard. And when you have try too hard syndrome, there's something inside of you that you want to believe about yourself, but you don't really think it's true. So you overcompensate by having all this bluster and all this sturm and drawing and all that different kind of stuff, because inside, the truth of the matter is you want to be more important than you are, or you want to feel more important than you are, or you want people to treat you like you're more important than you are, and all that feeds into try too hard syndrome. So I can see that on some level. It's just that the level of annoyingosity is so high until it's hard to get past everything that he does. Go ahead, Nims.
I was going to say, I agree with everything that you guys were saying, and it takes a lot for me to look at a corrupt and apathetic character like the administrator who, Steve is right. He actually guessed it. He got the whole situation correct, but he is corrupt and apathetic because of the situation he's in and long years of being in that job and everything else. But it's like I look at that and I'm rooting for that guy versus the guy who is technically, quote unquote, doing the right thing. But the thing, and what Steve was saying really, sparked something in my brain that made me realize why I can't stand him, which is he is got that giant stick up his rectum, but there's no clearly defined reason for it. It's like if he was a zealot like Javert, committed to justice, he would have stood up for it and said it. If he was a scoundrel who was trying to advance himself, you should have shown us him trying to maneuver behind the scenes to take the administrator's job or something like that. But instead, he is almost the worst kind of zealot, because what he really cares about is not the murders. He's not committed to justice. He cares about, and he says this numerous times in the episode, that it was the murder of 2 company men. And that's all he cares about. So he's a complete tool for that company. He's a complete jackass. So it's like there's nothing redeeming about him, and there's nothing redeeming about him as villain, because he is a company suck up, and he's not even doing this for the most, at least at this point in this first episode, at least we could say that he is trying to go behind the backs to get a promotion, to get off this planet, to do something. But instead, he's just doing it because he's so in love with this company that he can't stand the fact that 2 company men got killed. It's like, dude, get over yourself and go to the brothel. Just move on. So he is really, really annoying, and his motivations, they don't make any sense, and they're not compelling.
It's funny how we keep coming back to the brothel as the only scene we remember.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
Nim said something kind of in passing that I want to expound on a little bit, and here it is. The other, I won't say it's a problem yet. We haven't seen enough yet, and to pick something that we've reviewed that we could compare it to, that would be like the first episode of Moon Knight. First episode of Moon Knight. Now, whether you liked it or not is not what I'm talking about. First episode of Moon Knight throws you into something where obviously something is going on. So if you don't know anything about the character, you are at least intrigued about why this man is chained up to the bed. And it seems like he doesn't know that he's chained up to the bed. And then it introduces the entire crux of the Moon Knight character is this in his head or is it real? And we do get to see, the title character by the end of the first episode. And all kinds of things happen. So if you don't know anything about the character, one thing is that you want to see what happens next. But Nims was talking a few minutes ago, and they helped me realize with Andor, another thing that gives you just that blah feeling, and that is that they haven't introduced anybody or anything we haven't already seen and done better already. So you say you're a thief, we've seen thieves. We've seen Han Solo, the ultimate scoundrel of the entire Star Wars story world. We've seen smugglers. Now, if this was Talon Card, that would be fun to see. I've been waiting for years to see both Talon and Mara on the big screen, for those of you that have read Timothy Zahn's books. But he's a thief, he's a smuggler, yeah, so what? He's a big time, he's a small time, so what? So he's got some tech that he's smuggling, so what? And that also feeds into the problem with prequels. It's why I generally don't like prequels, especially not in a sci-fi context, because whether you like it or not, and if you don't like it, why are you watching the genre? But anyway, if you don't like it, tech is a huge part of science fiction. And one of the funnest parts for those that are sci-fi aficionados, as we are, is examining the story world's tech. And whatever the rules are, and whatever you can and cannot do, and however it works, that's why Star Trek had technobabble. If you're a Trek fan, you love that stuff. Most people hate it. I love it. I love hearing Geordi talk. I love hearing Data talk.
Heck, I just got done spending 2 days doing wiring diagrams and tech stuff for a suit of armor in a fictional universe that we're writing. So,
we love that stuff. But I'm saying here, I kept expecting there to be even, some prequel tech we hadn't seen, or the way I thought the episode was going to end was that we were going to discover something very much related to Rogue One or the Emperor or Anakin or somebody in the story world. We don't ever have to see them, but it was going to be kind of like the crux of what's going on. Now, that may still happen. I just wanted to see it in this first episode to make me want to watch the next one. And so the episode actually ends on a flashback, and they're looking at the crash ship, and the kids go running towards it, and he takes the foreshadowing look at his sister, like maybe the last time I saw you, or our lives are about to change. None of that is bad. It's just
No.
not new. Now, to bring in another comparison, when we meet Naru or Nardu, however you're supposed to say that, in Prey, immediately we are caught up in the world of the Comanche tribe. Unless you study that regularly or you are a Comanche yourself, it's introducing a new culture. Nims talked about it earlier. Seeing a culture unfold in front of you, seeing their social customs, seeing their diet, seeing their assigned society roles, seeing their expectations, seeing the threats to how they live. So if you don't know anything about that world, we can enjoy seeing that happen as a setup to what's going to happen as the predator invades it. But again, there's none of that here. And that's what I wanted to see, because in the opening scenes of Rogue One, that's exactly what happens when the scientists think, all that's behind me, and then they get recruited. And it was kind of the punch of the opening scenes of Rogue One is, once you get involved with us, you ain't gonna never get out. It was very mafia-esque. It was very like, because another trope I love is a character that used to do some dirt or used to do some stuff for a large company, and they said they thought they cut ties and they thought they were done. And I put that life behind me, and I got married and had a couple of kids, and I'm just trying to live my life now. And then here comes your past. Here come these people that promised to leave you alone like 20 years ago. And here they come talk about, that tech you made, or, the plans you had, or whoa, and you're like, and then the character has the immediate conflict of, am I going to get sucked back in? Am I going to get pulled back in? That kind of thing. I love that. That's what I thought was going to happen here. But alas, so it's like the seeds were there. It's like if it took 5 steps, they took like 2.5, maybe 3, but didn't really close the deal.
That's what I was saying. It's like it doesn't feel like good episodic television. I'm not saying it's bad, but it feels like the opening 20 minutes of a movie or the first couple chapters of a book. Because in the first 20 minutes of a movie or the first couple chapters of a book, you've got buy-in from the reader or the viewer for them to continue watching, for you to pay off the stuff that you are slow burning at the beginning. But in episodic television, you got to hit me, get my attention, establish some stuff, and then get out and hit me with something getting out, which says, I got to watch episode 2. It's just a different type of writing. It's like writing issues of a comic book,
Yeah, I was going to say, I was telling them before the show that this could be a case where, like Kenobi, this was originally a pitch for a film, and then behind the scenes process, it got dragged out into a 6-episode show, and they didn't pace it out well at all. These Disney shows have a very, very hard time with their pacing. I don't know what it is, particularly the MCU, but you also see some of it in Star Wars. I mean, we've seen it with Book of Boba Fett, where they didn't pace things quite right. And so what you're dealing with is, okay, you have these little elements, but it's just too slow burn. There's not enough really going on, and they don't do a good job of filling the empty space with anything that's interesting enough to keep us, invested in wanting to see the next episode. And yeah, so I completely agree on that.
You just sparked something in my brain though, Steve. I think you're exactly right, because I remember, thinking back now, interviews with Kathleen Kennedy and even Kevin Feige, where they talked about they wanted to do all these movies, and then the pandemic hit, and then Disney Plus came online, and so they needed
Solo failed.
Yeah, and they needed content. And it's like they've taken all these movie ideas and said, oh, well, it's easy to turn a 2-hour movie into a 6-hour TV show, 6 hours of TV, because, it's the same format. Well, it's not. It's different writing. It's a different writing style. And I do think you really have hit on something there. We'll probably never know, but I think you're right.
Now, there's one character I want to talk about that we already talked about him, but I want to go back because in retrospect, he's actually the most interesting character to me besides B2 emo because I still love B2 emo automatically because just the name alone is cracking me up. But there's another humanoid character I want to talk about, and then there's another scene which I think they're trying to be funny. Y'all know what I'm talking about, but it wasn't funny. Wasn't no payoff. So first, let's talk about the other interesting human character, and that to me is Chief Hines, and he's the one that rewrites the experiences at the brothel as a misadventure, and they were killed in a brothel, and he's just like shoo, we're going to shoo this away, and so you need to get over yourself and make up a good excuse for the deaths, whatever. I really liked his company man attitude. I really liked because I understand exactly where he was coming from. He was like, I'm too old for this stuff. He's like, I'm a few minutes away from retirement. And the thing about that is because I've seen people like that in real life. There's something that happens to many, not all, many teachers when they hit that point. They hit that point and they're counting the minutes until they get to retire. And so teaching is a profession where you got to keep your passion up. You got to love your students. You got to love your subject. And when that dies inside of you, it becomes very, very obvious. So this guy struck me a little bit like that. Like, if we retire at 65, I'm like 63 and a half. And here you come in with these dead jerks at a brothel. I ain't got time for that. And neither do you. So they had a misadventure, but write it up or whatever, make up a good story, deuces. I actually kind of love that because I can really relate to him. And the thing about his character is with that kind of setup, what level do we take that to? Like, how many more disturbances are we going to see that get that kind of treatment? Steve, you were going to say something?
No, I think I'm pretty much done.
I had something on that though.
Go ahead, James.
I agree with you. I mean, I think he is an apathetic, a corrupt character, but it's understandable why he's gotten to that point. Kind of what you're saying. But the other thing is, and this was really good writing in this part. So it's why it's hard for me to. I can't say this is bad. It just I was kind of bored, but there was stuff there that was promising. And in this case, it's like, okay, everything that is looming over this whole era and Cassian and all this is the Empire. And in one line, they capture the menace of the Empire from that character where he says, it's better off if we do this and not get on the Empire's radar, basically. And it's like
smart.
Yeah. And right there, without ever seeing a stormtrooper, without seeing anybody in an Imperial uniform or anything, the Empire becomes a character and it's looming. And I was like, that's well done. That was good. It's like, give me more of that. Just little things that show signs of oppression where people are like, look, I know what the right thing to do here is, but if I do it, the chances are it's going to bring me more trouble than it's worth, because of the Empire.
And I think that's important because we need to see with Cassian that he has a reason to hate the Empire. We need to see him run into these situations time and time again, because it's not just that, he hates the Empire. He hates the Empire so much that he will sign up with the Rebel Alliance and literally kill for that cause. So that means you need to see that means you need to see the Empire front and center as a dangerous threat.
And I'll ask you guys this question, but I'll state for myself. I'll say, I was expecting some level of hate from Cassian right off the bat here, because this is an origin story for him with the Empire. If I had to rate his hate for the Empire from 0 to 10 from what I saw in episode 1, it's a 0. I don't even think the Empire registers on his radar at all.
He doesn't register on their radar, so that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Well, another missed opportunity here. Then I'm going to talk about the y'all was trying to be funny scene. Y'all was trying to do your little Joss Whedon thing, but it fell flat. But another possibility here is, and we do see it in Kenobi. Whether or not it was done well is another conversation. But what happens after Palpatine stands up and declares himself emperor? And Padme utters her great line, "This is how liberty dies with thunderous applause." So there's something intriguing to me about those early years, because if you read any of the incredible soul books about Vader, the Emperor basically had Vader prove himself, and you see Anakin get his red lightsaber, you see him get the Kyber crystal, but you find out why they're red and what Sith have to do and what that costs and the slaughter, the amount of sheer slaughter that Anakin does in those first years is just incredible, but it's great to watch. And there's so many other things going on because you realize, again, I'm talking about the graphic novel series, the trade paperbacks, you realize that, of course, the Jedi Purge wasn't complete. Of course, there were more Jedi than just the ones we see die on screen. Of course, there's more going on. And so, no transition to power is smooth. Every transition of power, has some wrinkles to iron out. And that's a fascinating story, seeing what happens after Palpatine declares himself the Emperor. And we're just 15 years in. And because we know 20 years in, we get Death Star, which is what Rogue One is about. But I mean, leading up to that, see, that to me is a more interesting story. The more I think about it, I'm like, well, if we did, if they did a show called, Palpatine's Throne Room or something, that would have been cool if we could see, like, every episode included a perspective from a different alien race about what the Empire was doing on their planet, and then it begins and ends with Palpatine or something like that, or Anakin there. That would have been cool, that kind of thing. So I agree that the shadow of the Empire, big wink right there, the shadow of the Empire is there and it's looming, but it needs to come down a little bit heavier, and it needs to be a little bit more connected on screen. So that'll make us care more. But again, every character, doesn't need. But anyway, let me talk about y'all's trying to be funny moment. And that's when, let me see, Andor is trying to get away, and he runs into his friend Nurchi, and he's got his big, muscle alien vetch, and there's supposed to be a big intimidation thing. So he's 8 feet tall, standing over there looking at him, and then he's like, dumb. He's like, "Oh, you told me I was just supposed to stand here," and I'm like, "Was y'all trying to be funny? Because that wasn't funny. It was funny to me how unfunny that was." So it's like, why would you put that in, and then there's really no payoff?
Yeah,
Like,
you're exactly right. You're exactly right.
It's not a real threat payoff. It's not a really funny payoff. It's a disposable character, meaning if you take that scene out, nothing about the story changes. And I was like, now there's some potential there, because what you're supposed to do is set up multi-antagonist vectors. So if I've got a friend that's turning into an enemy because I won't pay him the money I owe, that's interesting. That might be somebody else on my tail that might cause me problems later, but they try to comic relief it, and So I was like, so the more I talk about this show, the more it feels like a great big bowl of almost.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about this character is exactly right, and it applies to a lot of the situations in this first episode, because they threw a bunch of stuff at us and didn't give us any reason to care about what was going on, didn't give us any clue that any of this was important. Now, there's the opposite problem where you could be like the Rings of Power, where they're so on the nose that they're punching you in the face every other minute while you're watching that show. Versus this show, which is just throwing all sorts of stuff at us, and we're ducking characters left to right, not knowing what we're supposed to catch and care about.
They name drop how many names, like in one of the early scenes with B2 Emo, and it's like, Marva, I don't know who that is. Why should I care? All these other names. It's like, okay, who are they? Why does it matter? What am I even looking at? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it's exactly what it is, and it's like, could Lurchy be important later on? Possibly. But it's like, I've got so many people going on. I've got stuff going on at some like shipyard. I've got the miner stuff. I've got his mom that they were talking about, who he never saw, but there's something going on with the mom and that miner who has got his alibi. What is going on there? That was just kind of thrown in and then taken away. I've got the boyfriend. I've got the girl. I've got all these movie pieces, and I'm like, come on, it's like you got to give us something. You got to give us a reason to at least believe that some of this stuff is going to stick, because right now it's all noise. That's what it is. It's really noise, and it takes away from the enjoyment of an episode, which even if it it's a little bland for my taste. I think there's some stuff there that's promising, but there's so much noise. It's like I'm just trying to filter it all out.
And more than anything else, in terms of wanting to continue, since it's a prequel, you have to tie it into something we know. You got to tie it into something that's got some type of through line already established, which is the limitations of a prequel, which is why I generally don't care for them, because you already know who lives and dies. So if you know that your main character is going to survive to go to the next movie, maybe everybody else you meet ends up dying, but you know they won't. So you've got to write it very smartly to convey a real sense of danger and all that. So honestly, there's not that much more to say about this episode. In all honesty, there's not that much more to say. I do kind of want to see where it goes, and I do kind of want to see if things open up. But not because of anything necessarily that the show did, but because I love the Star Wars world. Say that 3 times fast, and maybe something will turn up that will pique my interest or will be a nice wink to something that we do care about. So it's Kenobi and Boba Fett made too much of a joke out of their central characters. And out of all the characters, we didn't want to become joke characters. It's like what they did to Thor and Hulk in the MCU. The Mandalorian takes his characters very, very seriously. And although it did have some missteps, it still gave us great characters to care about. So I'm interested to see where this is going to fall. And the last thing I'll say before I throw it over to my co-host for closing thoughts is there's always the issue of saturation and oversaturation. And when the market starts to get oversaturated, that actually means you have to work harder to make the new entries worth something. And so when you're already dealing with a glut of Star Wars content in a way we've never had it before, because Star Wars used to be movies and they used to be movie events. But now that we've got a glut of this TV-based content, then they can't just slap the brand name on it and Star Wars, so it must be good. No, they've got to work harder to make us more invested, because especially when you're doing prequel stuff, we know where all of this is going, and we've seen battles and tech and stakes all higher than this. So what is it about this story that you're telling us that makes us want to come back? So let me hear from my co-host on closing thoughts, because it really isn't a lot more to say. Steve.
Yeah, I would say that this episode is a lot of missed opportunities, brought down by bad pacing, some shoddy thinking through, and a villain that frankly is underwhelming. And really, I really had wished that there had been like more villainous threats, because I feel like there's just not enough to really make me fear for anybody. Had there been like a criminal underworld sort of setup on the planet that Andor is on, maybe there would have been something, that would have given them something to do to, and some action things to do, but there's really nothing there. You have the deputy inspector, who is just one of the most irritating villains I've seen. And if not for Reba, I think he would have taken the top. And so you really have this all going on. You have a subplot that takes place in the past that could have some value. There's potential there, but because we don't understand anything that's going on, we don't care about anybody that's there. So that's wasted. And you have this whole setup with Andor trying to get away from a murder charge, and trying to disappear and run, and that's kind of wasted too. And we don't see any investment in why Andor would care about the Empire, or why it would be set up to join the rebels later on. I mean, it's just, there are things there. It's not bad. I mean, I don't want to say don't watch it. I mean, it's okay to watch once, but I mean, when you get right down to it, it's not firing the way that it should. The opportunities are not being taken advantage of to their fullest extent. And ultimately, it's just kind of, okay, it was a show. I watched it. That's what you come away with, because it just doesn't hit and land enough of the notes that it has, and it doesn't hit enough of the points that it has to really be worth it. And honestly, you kind of wonder, was there really a point in having Cassian Andor have a show in the first place? Is he a character that really kind of justifies having a show? So far, it really doesn't look that way. And honestly, it's even worse when you consider he's really a better character with K2SO, and he's nowhere in the first few episodes. So it's like, in addition to that, it's like it's like taking Chewbacca away from Han Solo, and then just having Han kind of going through his motions, which would be fine if you had a character as interesting as Han, but Cassian really at this point is no Han Solo, and so because of that, it's just okay. This is a show that happened. I watched it. I don't feel like I wasted my life, but there are certainly things that I could have been watching that would have been more satisfying.
Definitely agree. Mims.
Yeah, I think how I'm going to wrap this up is to touch on something that you brought up a couple times that I think is really important, which is that this is a prequel. And I think the problem with prequels is that the first time we were introduced to this character, that is the end point. That is the if this character has a character arc, that's where he begins in Rogue One, is where his arc presumably would end on this story. And so, there's 4 paths that he could, or 3 paths, 3 or 4. Let me think. There's his loss of innocence, acquiring skills that he would use as a rebel, and then becoming a rebel himself. So his movement towards the Rebel Alliance, or hatred of the Empire. Well, in this first episode, the first 5 minutes, he already lost his innocence. He's murdered somebody in cold blood. He already seems to have the skills that he would need. I mean, he's swapping out parts and knows how to do all these different things. So those 2 character arcs seem to already be gone. Those story arcs. Mm-hmm. So the third one is moving to the Rebel Alliance and/or hatred of the Empire, and we didn't get any of that in the first episode. I didn't see anything that So it's like, that's why it kind of feels listless. It's like we've already crossed off 2 possible character arcs, for this character moving towards a fixed point that we already know where he's going to be at for Rogue One. So it's like, what did we do to advance the possible third one? And it doesn't seem like we did much at all. So we kind of treaded water, and did some stuff.
So I've got shoulder shrug. Steve's got Nim's got treading water.
Yeah.
So we're going to finish this one out because we started, but we just hope it turns up. So that's it for this one. Quick one tonight because there ain't too much more to say. So I want to thank my co-host. Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, glad to be here. I mean, even when we're talking about a show that is just kind of middling, as we have here, it's still fun to talk about the universe. And I will say this was a better experience than Kenobi. I will give it that. But as you say, it just that's not really saying much. There are a lot of experiences that are better than Kenobi.
Thank you so much, Nims.
No problem. I had fun. And I will say that the one thing I got out of an earlier show we did is I can always say that Darth Tool is no Girardi. So, so it's all good, because it's not Girardi. I saw a picture of Girardi the other day and he just made me mad. So,
And I will say, at least it ain't Harley. And on that note, thanks to everybody that watched us live. Don't forget to check out our other podcasts and episodes. We got stuff all over YouTube. We got something for everybody. We got artist interviews. We got writer interviews. We got up and coming new project interviews, which we have done for our Project Blood World. Shameless plug. We got old time movies. We got all the contemporary shows that you love. So be sure to check out Comic Crusaders and United Tapes Podcast Network.
I will say Rain Cross Press currently has its pre-launch page is live for Blood World on Indiegogo right now. So go check that out as well. So
Awesome. He's going to make a tweet and we're all going to retweet the mess out of that.
Yeah.
And so me and this crew will see you next time on the next episode of Sloppy Spoilers.
See you later, everybody.
Deuces.